one of you start with where you were born?
Me? You want me?
Sure.
Okay, I was born in Fulda, Minnesota. And my mother worked for this doctor over there. Now his name escapes me. But there was a lot of doctors practicing that just had kind of a bed or two in their home. And so my mother worked there as kind of a housekeeper, actually. But then when it was time for my delivery, of course, she went to that doctor, and I was born in that house. 1936, that's a lot of years ago, and medicine was practiced a whole lot different than it is today.
So, all right, Ken, where were you born? Let's start.
Zubey really wants to tell you where the name Zubey came from too, don't you?
Yeah, but she...
Okay, I was born here in Worthington, and I went to Central Grade School, and it kind of tore my heart down when they tore that building down, but they did put up a nice sign up there that says 1931 in honor of when I was born, so I appreciate that. And I went to high school here, elementary school here, high school up until the middle of 7th grade, and then my dad, who worked at the Ford Garage, which was downtown at the time, he was having headaches, really serious headaches. Right across the street from the Ford Garage was a clinic, so he went over there to the doctor, and the doctor says, his name was Shorty, his nickname, Shorty Jansen, and he says, Shorty, you got to get out of that garage because the gas is killing you. That was before they really knew about exhaust on cars. Now that everything's hooked up and it doesn't have. So in the middle of 7th grade, we moved out on a farm. I would say directly between Ellsworth, Adrian, and Little Rock. So in those days, you always went to town on Saturday night. And Saturday night was our Adrian town, and on Wednesday night we usually went to Ellsworth, and we had our locker plant in Little Rock, Iowa. So anyway, and so I got to go to country school there. And country school, being a normal kid, or probably worse than normal, I don't know, whatever. So once we moved out, I thought, hey, here's my chance not to skip school a little bit. Nobody knows where I'm at and what I'm doing, so I think I took about a week off. And by the time I finally went to school, I got there, and I remember all these kids. There was, I think, 13 or 14 kids in this room, and they looked at this kid that came in from the city, because they had been talking about this guy that moved from Worthington to the country, and it was very interesting. And occasionally, our teacher, who I think just at that time you could go to like a summer school and get a degree and teach in the country schools, just high school, summer school, and then teach. And occasionally she would speak German, and I think just about everybody in the class understood it but me. But anyway, it was a great experience. So I went there a year and a half. Of course, I was the smartest one in my class.
Of course.
The only one. So I was the only one in my class in 7th and 8th grade. And in those days, in order to go to high school, you had to take what they called Minnesota 8th grade exam. This is probably history for some of you. So if you went to high school, if you wanted to go to high school, you had to pass this 8th grade exam. So that was after the school year got over, then the teacher would take you back to school. In fact, when I went back for my 8th grade exam, it was just the teacher and I there doing it. So it just happened that she'd be looking over my shoulder, and I would be putting an answer back there, and she'd say, "Oh, Ken, I think you might want to take another look at that." Anyway, turned out I got a pretty good grade on my 8th grade exam. So I went to Ellsworth High School for half a year, which was really interesting, a small school, no school buses, but one of the neighbor boys had a Model A pickup. His name is Orville Christians, great guy. He'd pick me up, take me to school. It was about 6 miles. And so I did a half a year there, and then we could not find another farm. So then we moved back to Worthington, and my dad went back to the Ford Garage again. His health was better. And then in 1947, I think, he started with Shorty's Tech School, which is on Oxford Street, which is across from Casey's. Now it's a Hispanic garage. And then I worked there and finished high school, went out for football, but I got to play in one sophomore game, I think, when we were ahead 40-0. It was safe to put me in, so that was the end of my football career. I don't know how long you want me to talk on this, but anyway.
That's quite a speech for just asking what his name was.
Anyway, and then I worked with my dad in the garage, and I thought, I want to try something different. So at that time, they were adding on to the hospital, and they had an opening for electrician apprentice. And I thought, maybe that's something I want to do. So I worked for about 1.5 years on that. But then after working with it and working on the ladders and things, I decided it wasn't for me. So then I think about then the draft was getting about close. I was about to get drafted. My brother, who went with the guards from this unit here, was in Korea fighting. And it was bad, if you ever watched the Korean War thing. And he said, whatever you do, don't get drafted, or in 16 weeks, you're going to be here. So I was a little bit of a chicken, so I enlisted in the Air Force for 4 years, which was a great experience. And I can talk about that later, but anyway.
Well, you went from city mouse to country mouse back to city mouse then.
Correct, right.
Zubey, what did you do in school?
Well, I went 2 years to Brewster, where my family, my maiden name was Wing, and so my grandfather had a farm right outside of Brewster, and my folks lived in a smaller home on that same property to be helpful on the farm. And so I liked staying in the big house with Grandpa and Grandma. But anyway, I spent 2 years in the Brewster school, and then they moved to another farm closer to Worthington, and then I went to another country school. And so, like Kenny said, the country schools were quite an experience. And actually, it was a good way to learn, because you also became a little bit of a teacher and a little bit of a monitor for the younger kids. And so I was there until about 5th grade, and then my parents bought a farm up by Wadena. And so then I went to another country school, and that was about 1.25 miles away. And you know how you tell your kids, yeah, I walked to school, and then they say, oh yeah, Mother, and then you had to walk home again, and it was a long way, and in the snow, but that's true. And of course, this generation can't even, it's pretty hard for them to imagine how things were back then. The roads weren't real good, and cars weren't and pickups and motorized vehicles weren't like they are today either. So we did a lot of walking, which didn't hurt us. And so then I actually graduated from Wadena High School, and his name was Whitey Held, who became superintendent down here. And when I entered 8th grade in Wadena, he was teaching math, and then went on to school and became actually the superintendent of schools in Worthington. And from there, I graduated in '58, and I went to Minnesota Bible College and graduated 4 years later. I was with a degree in Christian education and youth work, and from there I went to a church in Clovis, New Mexico for a while, and then I got sick, and so I called Kenny and I said, Kenny, you're gonna have to come and get me. I had ended up in the hospital, and they couldn't decide exactly what it was. but it took a little while to recoup, and then I went back to Clovis for a while. So that pretty well brings me up to the time when we got married a little bit later.
Well, let's talk about that. Ken, you were in the Air Force,
Yeah.
and you were teaching in New Mexico, but tell how you met and your love story.
At that time, I was out of the Air Force and I was back working at what was then called Shorty's Texaco. And Zubey, you mentioned one thing about in Wadena, they also had a teacher by the name of Glenn Evenson,
Oh, that's right.
and who came to Worthington and was a band director and did an excellent job. He
So
also
actually,
came
we
from
all came
Wadena.
back to Worthington.
Yeah, right. and then church is a big part of our life. So I'm sitting in church, and here's this good-looking gal sitting off to the right with her grandparents. And I thought, who in the world? That's pretty nice. Oh, I got to meet her. So anyway, we went to a couple of church parties, and one night, I don't know if she didn't really ask for a ride home, but one of the other gals that was trying to line me up says, well, Zubey is here, can you give her a ride home? And, oh man, I said, I'd love to. And that's kind of how
That's where it started.
That's how it all got started.
What year are we in then?
Oh,
That would have been 1959, probably 58 and 59, the end of 58.
and I was in the service from November, these are dates you remember.
Right.
November 25th, 1951 to November 24th, 1955. And you remember them in the military.
bet.
And another thing, curiosity, you remember your military number, 17345-180, and they must drill that into you when you go in the military, that number, because I couldn't hardly remember my telephone number, but that is one number I always remember.
And he forgets what he's supposed to bring home for dinner, too.
Well,
could,
when's your wedding anniversary?
Yeah. When is your wedding anniversary?
April 3rd, we were married April 3rd, 1959. So it's
He
been,
did remember. But you know what he remembers? Because April 3rd is his birthday.
yeah, I thought that was a cool move. I wouldn't forget my anniversary. So how many years is that?
How many years is it?
You do the math. Can you do the math? 59 to 6 to 23, 64, something like that.
64, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 64 years. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your early married life. You're living in Worthington?
Right.
Okay, talk about that a little bit.
Kenny can talk about the work situation. I'll just talk about our first home was in a little apartment where
Foskey Plumbing was
Foster
underneath.
Plumbing was underneath. And then we moved to 1017 Milton
You might
Avenue.
tell them about one night when I tried to escape.
And he did try to escape. He was delirious, I guess. I don't know, he started shaking the shades and saying, I gotta get out of here.
Yet still
I
he
said,
sits.
"It's a
Here he
little late."
sits.
Yeah, it's a little late for that.
Yeah, and it was on the second floor too. That'd have been quite a
Yeah, that would not have been a good picture. So anyway, I was then we moved to 1017 Milton. We had two little girls, or not then, but eventually, and then it was 12 years later that we had our boy. But in the meantime, I was active working in the church as church secretary, as youth leader, as all those jobs require. And so, do you want to know when I started into business?
I do.
Okay.
Tell us about that.
So it was 12 years later, we had our son, and he always wanted to be with his dad, of course, and I was feeling a little restless, I guess, and I decided to open up the Crafty Corner And then it's where Casey's is now. There was a little house there, and the mall was across the street. And so I opened a consignment shop with some items that were personally bought, but consigned. That's in the days when crafts were very heavy, a lot of it going on.
What year was that, Zubey?
Well, that would have been about 1982.
Okay.
And so then I started it because I wanted to have fun, you know, and I like sewing, and I wanted to also to learn how to quilt. And I had inherited from my great-grandmother a quilt that is very unusual, and I needed to find out more about that. So one day a gal came into the store when it was still just a consignment store, and she had a whole bunch of quilted items, and I said, "So you quilt?" And she said, "Yes, I used to manage a quilt store in Hannibal, Missouri." And I said, "Oh man, you're like falling from heaven on this counter." And so she went with us to Minneapolis. I got $5,000 from the bank, and that's another story. But we had a big Oldsmobile, and I was so not rejected, but dejected, because we got most of that $5,000 in that big trunk when in goods. And so it was like, oh boy, that money went fast. And so from there, she started the first classes, and then she had to leave because her husband got transferred. And one day a lady came in, and I saw that she had a "I Love Bernina" sticker on her window of her car, and I said, "So, you sell Berninas?" She said, "Yeah, how would you like to sell Berninas?" I said, "Are you kidding me? I'd always wanted one." And I won't get into why I didn't have one, but so that's where we had to convince Kenny that he had to go along, and we had to spend a week in training down in, where were we?
Des Moines, Iowa.
Des Moines, Iowa. And so he said, "Oh, Zubey, you don't want to sell sewing machines." I said, "Yeah, I think I do." And she was very persuasive, and so he said, "Okay, I'll do it." And so we got there, and she said, "Now, Kenny, you're going to have to take the mechanics, and Zubey, you're going to have to take the sewing." And you know, we both went to class, and when we came out, I had a little break, and so I thought to myself, I should have gone over sewing machines a little bit with him before he and he came out, and I said, "Well, how did it go?" He says, "Well, they said wind a bobbin," and I said, "Well, what's a bobbin?" And so that's where it all started.
Wow.
And so that's where I'll let him tell his side of the story, and when he came to the Crafty Corner.
Well, I know
he did not, he was doing his own thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And now you're probably one of the few. I know that my mom's friends bring their machines up to you,
Luckily,
and you're the only one that can fix them.
Well, luckily we have a technician that does it, because I got just enough to know that I really did, because it was. But at first the machines were a lot simpler. Now it's computerized, and it's a lot of tech now. And fortunately we have a technician that takes care of it. But anyway, it's hard to get their dates, but in 1955, then I was discharged from the military, November 24th, 1955. So in January of 1956, my brother was also got out of the military, and my dad sold us then, which was now Shorty's Texaco. And then a few years later, my brother wanted to move south. He wanted to get where it was warm, so he moved to Dallas, Texas. And then later on, I can't remember, I think 1971 I started Worthington Sports Center. Anyway, we started selling Yamaha motorcycles. Originally, we started selling Yamaha snowmobiles because Charlie Nystrom, who most people know from Ochita Orchard, was in school, and he said, "Why don't you sell them Yamaha snowmobiles? They're the best, and they have oil injection. Nobody else has it." He says, "You sell them, I'll fix them." And Charlie's very good at fixer. He's a good fixer. Anyway, so we sold snowmobiles. Then the next year he says, "Why don't we sell motorcycles too?" So then we got the Yamaha motorcycle franchise, and Charlie helped with that. And then I liked that part of the business, so I sold the Texaco and started Worthington Sports Center. I think it was in 1971. Does that sound right?
I don't know, Kenny.
Anyway,
I've lost the years.
it's hard to remember. Anyway, I started Worthington Sports Center, which is now closed, and I did that for like 20 years. And then later on, I sold it out to Jim Klinkenborg, who kept it and put the new building up and stuff, which is now an event center. And then Zubey gave me an offer to come back to work for her. And
Well, he said he didn't think he wanted to work for his wife.
then
You know what our daughter said? "Are you crazy, Mother? We'd like a family to come home to." I think she thought we were going to kill each other. And I said, "I'll be good." I took a pledge, and that's been really hard.
and Zubey said I should never talk about this, but I shall anyway.
No, don't. Whatever it is.
Anyway, at that time, I ran also for county commissioner. So if you want a humbling experience, run for political office when all your friends encourage you. Yeah, man, I will vote for you. But then you don't win, you know.
Because he forgot to campaign.
Well, I didn't campaign. First of all, I didn't think I had to. We were also doing the Clay County Fair at the time. We were going down there every day. And just, I think one afternoon, our daughter Lori and I went out and did a little campaigning. But meanwhile, it's just for anybody that goes for office, it is a humbling experience. Of course, it's nice to win. But so then Zubey accepted me.
That isn't where God wanted him. That's what I
Evidently,
tell him. Yeah.
God wanted me back working for Zubey. And so then now we've been doing that for about 20-some years. I've been at the Crafty Corner helping with Zubey.
Time kind of flies, doesn't it?
It sure
He's
does.
putting 15 here and 20 there and 20 more over here. And
I could tell you a little bit about my military experience if you're interested.
Sure,
And your what?
absolutely.
Military.
Yes.
Rather than be, like I told you, rather than going to Korea and be drafted, I enlisted in the Air Force. And there was, I think, about 10 or 12 of us from Worthington that went. And one of my best friends, who has passed now, Bob Lefty Jansen, was one of them. He and I were great buddies, and we joined the Air Force together. And we also had a little bit of a, we knew we were going to Lackland, Texas, which is by San Antonio. And we knew it was November and it was going to get cold. So we enlisted in November, went down there. And then from there, after about 6-8 weeks of basic training, I went to Amarillo, Texas for mechanical training for 6 months. And he went someplace else for, he was into supply. Anyway, and then from there, I got transferred to Laredo, Texas. And we all know where Laredo's in the news a lot now. There was an Army base there that they just turned over to the Air Force. And down there we trained foreign cadets primarily on jet planes. We had a 2-seater called a T-33. And I was there for like 18 months. And in the wintertime they'd say, "Aren't you going home for Christmas?" I'd say, "Are you kidding me? It's 80 degrees here and it's 20 below in Minnesota. I'll take my leave."
No dummy, right?
Yeah, right. I'll take my leave in June or July and go there. And then one day they posted a thing on the bulletin board that we need mechanics to go to Korea, and they need 15. And I think it took about a half hour. 15 guys signed up because, you hate to have your whole enlistment. You'd like to see part of the world, and what a great opportunity. So then we went to Korea and by boat, which was not a fun thing. I got seasick, and 14 days on a boat and 7 days I was over the side of it. It's a terrible thing. But anyway, then I spent about 5 or 6 months in Japan, and then I went to Korea for about 3 or 4 months. And then I had about 6 months left, and I went to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, which is in Tucson, Arizona. If you ever get down there, they have a big salvage yard for airplanes out in the desert where they park them and they take the spare parts off. So Davis-Monthan is a huge base. And while there, I was with a fighter group that we had there. And then I got ready to be discharged. I had 3 stripes, which was a sergeant. And they talked to me about re-enlisting. And I said, will you give me 1 more stripe? Which would mean more money, of course, and more benefits. I think if you re-enlist, I think you could get that. Well, I said, is that a guarantee? They said, no, we can't guarantee it. So then I got discharged in 1955 and then went back to the gas station.
So, wow, that's
And
a lot.
When I feel kind of guilty.
When you ask him a question, you get the long edition.
I love it.
Well, what's
It's
interesting
a perfect
also.
interview. It's a perfect
What's interesting
interview.
also when, a lot of times when you're in a place they say, have the military guys stand up or something. But really in the Air Force, we didn't suffer. I mean, we had it really good. Always a warm bed and always plenty to eat. And when we were in Japan and Korea, we had houseboys, believe it or not, that would come in and clean our barracks, make our beds, make coffee for us.
But Ken, the war ended, that's why.
Yeah, for about $40 a month, and we all chipped in. But it was good, and I love the Air Force.
Okay.
So let's talk about, so after you got married and you really got into Worthington and were business owners and worked and participated that way, you've also done a lot of things for the community. Let's talk about your volunteer work and your involvement in different organizations.
I think I'm gonna let Zubey talk about this because if she wouldn't have pushed the thing of being involved, I don't think we'd have been involved. But we did get involved because that's what she thought was the right thing to do, which it was.
Yeah, talk about why you thought that was important, Zubey.
Well, first of all, the town that you live in is going to make a difference to your business. And I just feel that it's the right thing to get involved. And so we joined the chamber. That was our first big step. And got involved in different aspects and different committees in the chamber. So while the years have gone by and we've done it all, I guess, or pretty much. And the big thing was right now we are serving on the image committee. And so our job on the image committee of the chamber is to look around Worthington and spot things that we feel need a little improvement. And in talking to others and in visiting other cities, what we noticed is there's a lack of statues and artwork out for everyone to see. And so that was our emphasis, and I guess we talked about it so much at the image committee that we started talking about Amelia and Gary Crippen, not Gary, Ray had written for the Globe many times about why aren't we doing something with the Amelia, the fact that she actually spent from 1907 through 1911 here in Worthington in the summers. That's a lot of time. This was her growing up years. And why aren't we doing something with that? And then a few years back now, our committee had kind of taken up the musical instruments also. And one of the members of our committee had done a lot of work on that, and so we dropped the Amelia project for then. And now there's the outside musical instruments was eventually picked up by the city because they there was a flaw, they said, in our plan. So we turned it over to the city. So we went back to Amelia, and so the Globe a year ago gave us the proceeds from the chair sales, which they always auction off, and from that they gave us $5,000 to start the Amelia project, and it was enough to get us give the okay to the artist to start the project. And she's beautiful. And now this year, a year later, we placed her on Sailboard Beach. And the thing is that we still will have to continue our fundraising, because we are about, well, I would say we're probably 22,000 now short. But we'll continue that. But what we feel, it's a tourism attraction for this town. And what our idea was that people come, sit down on this bench with Amelia in the center, and have your picture taken. And you know, when city was mounting her on the Thursday before the regatta, and they wanted to make sure she was setting the way we wanted her. And then they said, okay, we're gonna bolt her down. And they were told by the artist's company exactly how to do this, because it looks like the bench is just sitting there, but it's mounted into the cement and you can't tell it. And so they said, so we went and ate breakfast. They said, we'll tell you when we're done. And so when we got the message, we went back to cover her, because we were gonna just unveil her at the regatta. And here there were two gals already sitting on the bench taking pictures of each other, and we said, this is exactly what we wanted to happen. And that's what we saw after she was unveiled on Saturday. People were excited to have their picture taken. And so there's more people know about her than you would suspect. And kids are learning about her in school. And there are children's books out there about Amelia. She's a great inspiration, especially to little girls. And her theme was always, you have a dream, pursue it. And so we're just really proud about that statue. She's beautiful. She's bronze. It cost us, the original price was over $50,000, but they gave us a 10% discount, so that brought it down to what, $46,710, I think. And so we still have a ways to go, but that's okay. We'll keep plugging away at this until, and hopefully this can just be the beginning of. There will be a sign that we're putting up, so all of those who are willing to invest $500 or more will be recognized on a sign that will go up to tell a little bit about Amelia, and then on the backside we will put names. And what we're now encouraging people to do is, perhaps you'd like to put a name on there in memory of. And I know Kenny was saying, I think I'll put my dad on there. He was a businessman in Worthington, started Shorty's Texaco on a gravel road. That's what Oxford Street was when he started that business. And so that was quite a venture for him. But I think perhaps there are others who would like to put a name on there in memory of. And so we're open to all of that, and we encourage it, in fact.
Another project we did as New and Kiwanis, with the help of Chad Cummings and others, was the sprinkler park, or what is the correct name of that?
Water park.
Water park, or the sprinkler system for the kids.
Oh, the
little
splash
kids.
pad?
Splash pad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people had been going to other towns, in fact, taking their kids to other towns for a splash pad, and they said, we need a splash pad. So our New and Kiwanis got that project going. I don't know exactly where all the funds came from, but we got it going.
I think the
Nunaquanis.
city also invested
They
in it.
yeah, I think probably so. So that was one of the projects we worked with as members of Nunaquanis. We're also members of the Elkswood, had different projects going. And I know Zubey's a little bit humble, and she wouldn't tell you this, but Oldsmobile and through Marv Swoomer used to have an award every year. What was it called? Any,
Woman of the Year.
Anyway, it was Woman of the Year, and so we got that one year. So for work in Worthington, she became Woman of the Year. And both of us have spent time on the chamber board. Zubey was been chairman of the chamber board, and of course on our church boards and different things there. And I'm trying to think other things in the community that we may have done.
So you've given back to this community, and you talked about, Ken, your dad starting a place on Oxford, which was a gravel road. All the changes that you've seen. Talk about the changes in Worthington
Well, it's
in your
really
lifetime
amazing.
here.
When my dad started, there was a gravel road out there, and then next year they paved it. And I don't know exactly, but across the street from our gas station, which is, like I said, it's a Hispanic garage now, was a beautiful field, and a farmer by the name of Ivor Morgan was a farm out there. And he had the most beautiful black Angus cattle. We could look across the street from our station, and these beautiful black Angus. And then pretty soon, all you knew, at one time, in January, February one year, they came in with this big equipment and started tearing up the thing to build the mall. And which the mall was, I don't know how long the mall was here. Do you know the history of the mall?
I don't
About
have.
20 years,
But it did affect downtown because a lot of the businesses left Main Street. And people would come to Worthington just to do the mall. It was good. But malls, it just seemed, it's not the thing now. I mean, indoor malls. And
Well, the building needed a lot of repair also. And
And the way we shopped has changed,
It
and a
has
lot of
changed.
things have changed in this community and, worldwide, really,
yeah,
in the
right.
in the time you spent here on Earth and in the time I've spent here on Earth. What surprises you historically, or things that have changed in your lifetime? Is there something that sticks out to you in general?
Well, right now, what troubles me is the fact that the younger generation isn't so interested in working. And I don't want to get into anything political, but it's troubling to me, and because years ago, and not so many years ago, the drive-throughs, this was a perfect way for kids to make money. Kids aren't so interested in that anymore. And I guess life has become so easy that we take a whole lot for granted. And in my growing up days, okay, so when we lived on the farm and I was a kid by Brewster, my folks would say, okay, you can go out in that field and pull mustard. And mustard was a plant with a yellow blossom, and it was in the beans and the corn, and a farmer didn't like that. So we were just little kids. I think, oh no, not pulling mustard. I hate pulling mustard. So then we moved up north, and I said, do they grow mustard up there? No, not so much. But guess what? They grow cucumbers. So my folks planted a big garden of cucumbers. And so it would be like, okay, kids, get up. It's time to go pick cucumbers. And I'm thinking, oh no, this is worse than mustard. You get that slimy stuff all over your hands. But times were tough. And my folks never had indoor plumbing on that farm. They had lights, electricity, but not indoor plumbing before I actually left for college. And you grow up that way, and you just accept it. It's just the way of life. And so anyway, we were expected to go out there and pick pickles, and it would be about every other day, when they're really bearing. And so I was really glad when I went off to college and I didn't have to pick pickles anymore. And so, no, I don't plant cucumbers anymore either.
When we'd go up to visit Zubey's folks, they had outdoor plumbing, and we had 2 little girls. And that was quite an experience. They just about do anything not to have to go out to that shed out in the back. When you grow up like that, and in that day, it was not unusual for farms to just have an outdoor buffet. It wasn't unusual, but now it would be. I hate it even at the regatta when they have those.
You don't like to revisit that part of your life?
I don't like to revisit that at all.
I could tell you a cute story about when we moved out on the farm. In those days, they had these phones where you turn a crank, and
Right.
it had so many rings, and everybody were on one line. Well, we raised sheep, and we had a ewe. We farmed with another guy. We had a ewe that was about to give birth, and so he called over that morning. I don't know exactly how it happened, but anyway, my dad called him. Yeah, my dad called him and said, "Oh yeah, we had them twins last night." Well, he was talking about the ewe. We had twin lambs, which is not unusual, but all the women on the line in the country was listening. So the next thing you know, our phone starts ringing, and they say, "Mrs. Jansen, can we come over and help you with those twins?" But that's the way it was. I tell you, those country lines, you knew everybody's business.
That was the old-time Facebook.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly. If you can imagine that. But that was so true, and I thought that was really a good example how people listened in. Well, when we moved out on the farm, we had no electricity, so you had that. I don't know how the phone worked, and we had a battery to run our radio, and then we had lanterns to do the cows, and we milked cows and all that good stuff. I remember one time we had like 12 cows, I think, and my brother and my dad was out in the field working. So it was up to my mother and I to milk the cows. Of course, you milk by hand.
Right.
And so it was time to milk, and my mother said, "Well, you go out and start milking, and I'll be out there in a little bit." And she was sewing. And so about 2.5 hours later, I was on the 12th cow, and she came out. I said, "Forget it. I'll milk them all," and I did. I don't know how much milk I got, but I did. I milked 12 cows. It was a great experience.
You talked about knowing the value of hard work, and how now we've got more of a convenient life, an easy life, some might say. How have you together had this long marriage and weathered the not so easy parts of life?
Well, that's what marriage is. There's ups and downs, and you just decide that you're going to do it together. I think we both took those vows pretty seriously, for better or for worse. And you're going to get worse. Worse comes with better. And you have to stick to it, because it's easy to quit. It's easy to say, I'm done with this. But you know what? What I've seen through the years is that when that happens to a lot of people, the next one isn't any better, because first of all, you have to decide what is wrong here and try and correct it, because otherwise you just take your misery with you and you keep repeating it. So I think we both took those vows very seriously, and I'm sure there were times when I thought, why did I marry this guy? And I'm sure he thought the same thing. Why did I marry her? And you'll feel that sometimes, but then the next day you know why you did. And it's just the ups and downs that you have in a marriage. And if you think that it's all going to be rosy, I'm sorry to tell you, it won't be, because life isn't that way. I mean, life has its ups and downs, and we've had a good marriage, and but we've had our down times. We've had our times when it's like the financial crunches that come along with any marriage, and then we've had the good times. So you just stick with it, and it all comes together. Is that right, Kenny?
I would say so. This is maybe a little bit gross, but
No, don't say that.
I won't talk about it. Oh, yeah, I will. Because we talk about good and bad times.
No.
No, I won't talk.
No.
Anyway.
I know what he's going to say.
I had diarrhea about a week ago.
No, stop it.
And I told Zubey, I said, it's better for worse, and this is kind of about as worse as it gets. And she was really good to take care of me. Anyway, we've been fortunate. Our children are educated, and they're all doing very well. And we have told them that if we don't get enough money to get Amelia paid off, that it might come out of their inheritance. So they've been good about donating.
I'm sure.
Yeah. And they can afford it too. They all have good jobs and are doing well. We're very fortunate in that case.
And so we have grandchildren. We have great-grandchildren now. And so the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they really get to your heart. And it's kind of nice because they can come over and you can send them home, and you don't have to have a guilty conscience if they do something bad.
No, that's
Right.
that's
Not
the beauty.
my fault.
So, in the long marriage and years you've had on the earth here, what makes you happy? Can you give anybody any advice on how to have a happy, long life?
Well, my faith in Christ has always been uppermost since I was a kid. I grew up in not such a happy family, but I had a grandpa and grandma that loved me and saw to it that I survived and that I met the Lord, and so actually my grandpa's the one that said, Zubey, I would like to see you go to Minnesota Bible College. And so as much as he hated driving in the city, he drove me to the college, walked me in and said, this is my granddaughter and she's enrolling in the school, and paid my tuition. That is the only way that I could have ever gone. And so I just want to say to grandparents out there, you play an important part in people's lives. And so, just keep that in mind, because I had the sweetest grandparents, and they always saw to it that I was taken care of. And so my grandmother lived with us for several years after my grandfather died. In fact, that's how I met Kenny. My grandfather passed away, and I came back during the summer to stay with my grandmother to help her through those early days. And so I was kind of at loose ends. And here was this guy.
Tied him up for you,
Yeah,
huh?
he had a nice car.
I had a nice car, I did.
And he had some money.
And I was paid for it.
Even better.
I got to tell you, one of the conditions of the marriage, Zubey says, because of the alcohol in their family, says, if you want to be married to me, there will be no alcohol in your home. And, being in the military, of course, you drank and you did some things you're not proud of, but we got all through that. And that was probably one of the best agreements I ever made. So, and we've stuck with it, and it's sometimes not very popular with some people, but that's how we feel, and that's what we believe.
We have one guy said, one lady said to me, what do you do for fun?
If you don't drink, yeah.
It's like, I laugh so much anyway, I can't imagine if I was a little tipsy, you wouldn't like me at all. So anyway, it works for us. That's all I can say.
Well, it looks like everything's working for you. Any
Well,
last
the
thing?
diet hasn't really worked too well for us.
No, the diet.
Actually,
We've been on a diet most of our married life.
actually, I don't know what they call it in Weight Watchers, when you reach that goal and you don't have to pay to...
Lifetime member?
Lifetime, yeah.
So
And
he
believe it
took
or
that to
not,
heart.
lifetime member for Weight Watchers.
But that isn't the way. I mean, you can't just arrive and then forget.
Yeah, well, I went up, fell off the wagon, and start eating and enjoying life.
Weight is, and you know, when you travel to other countries, you'll notice that Americans were really heavy. And part of it is our diet. And we don't walk as much as they do in other countries either. But our diet, when you go into a restaurant, now I shouldn't say this out loud because the restaurant people now they'll cut back on the portions. But you get portions that you cannot eat. That's why a lot of times we'll share something. But also, I've noticed through the years that the young people have become heavier. And it's because of the drive-ins, the French fries, which we all love, the hamburgers, the convenience of all of this. But a lot of it is loaded with calories. But as you go by McDonald's and other drive-ins, you see that long line of cars that never seem to end. And we have become so accustomed and so busy in our lives that, and I find it happening to us, just pick up something. And it's not good for us to always eat like that. And I see it in the kids. There's a lot of young kids that are just really heavy. And it's all this extra stuff, the chips and the French fries and the you know what I'm
convenient
saying.
things,
Yeah. We just, and we don't especially like vegetables, and we don't eat a lot of vegetables, and yeah, it's not good for us.
This is the time of the year. I just want to get a plug in for our other project we work on with the Worthington Chamber and the community image part of the chamber is the flower power. And if you see a beautiful yard, and just call the chamber and give them the address, and each Monday night we take for a nice ride in our convertible, and we go out and place the sign, and people are so happy to get it. And so flower power, I think, is good for our community, and that's another project we're working on. Either call us if you see a beautiful yard, or call the chamber and we'll take a look and put a sign in their front yard for a week.
We've been called the flower fairies.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but could be worse.
I think that's a perfect description.
But the globe is, in most instances, prints the picture and the place. So we think that it has helped the town image, and people they talk about the flowers, and they talk about, you'll see different yards that are really taking it serious, but it has to be curb appeal, and a lot of gardens are in the back, and we can't judge from that because we can't be trudging to the back, so it has to have curb appeal. So no, it's fun, and like Kenny said, people are happy. Well, it makes you feel good. Somebody has noticed that we went to a lot of work, and it does improve the whole image of the town.
So you're out there spreading cheer in your convertible.
Yeah, that's great.
That's one way to get a ride, isn't it?
That's our Monday night thing.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that we didn't cover, or maybe we need another hour? Maybe we can catch up some other time. Anything else you want to say?
I guess we love Worthington. We intend to stay here, and this is going to be our final resting place.
Well, the reason we laugh is that one birthday, he came home and he said, "Oh, I just bought your birthday present," and he bought 2 plots, and it's like, really? So I was always saying, I don't want to be buried there because it's in a wetland, and and so we recently just changed our position, but but I wouldn't recommend any guy to do that. You know, that's not a good thing.
The deal was they had a deal for the vet.
Yeah, 2 to 1.
Yeah, if you were a vet, you could get buy one get one free. Yeah, and you know
that's the ultimate buy one get one.
I'm half Dutch blood, you know, and you say something like that to a Dutchman, what are you're gonna go for it? You know, there's no way. So, but after we did a little touring and see where it's located, we have upgraded since. So.
Well, actually, what happened? We took the tour of the cemetery. If anyone listening, be sure and do that when they give the tours.
With Jerry Fiola, that's excellent.
Because the history, it's the history that is important. And I said to Kenny, look, when you have just the flat area, you have no history that can be recorded. And so I convinced him finally that, you know, you want a little bit of your history on your tombstone, I think. And as you can plainly see, we had to finally address the situation because sooner or later, unless the Lord comes first,
so we gotta have a couple lots for sale.
yeah, we have a couple in the water area. No, it isn't that bad.
Well, thank you, Kenny and
It's been a
Zubey.
pleasure.